So I'm Lynnae Ruttledge, and it's really my honor and my privilege to do this final session of feedback from the workshops. And I'd first like to start by saying, even though there's not a lot of people in the room, what we've seen over these 2 days, and especially this afternoon in workshops 3 and 4, we've seen active engagement. We've had people who are consciously a part of the discussion and engaged in strategies across systems, between countries, between disciplines, and I think that's really the value of what DOCTRID is all about. I think we were particularly value added by having the Inclusive Research Network a part of this whole process, because hearing from people who are engaged in research and talking with their peers about what's important to them is a real critical part of what we want to continue to do as we go forward. We have 2 very active groups that work this afternoon. One was in relation to school and third level and/or employment, and that was Connie Sung and the group that she brought together. And then the 4th workshop was around prenatal to 1,000 days, which is really interesting because when I started in this field, it was always called birth to 3. And we really have changed that perspective to say it begins before birth. It's really prenatal. And it's really in terms of those 1,000 days and what happens within that time frame. So I learned a lot throughout this last 2 days. So we've had fellows who have been actively taking notes and helping to summarize, and we're going to tap into their expertise and their skills to share with us what they heard and what they saw in the workshops. Some were taking incredible notes, some were listening and reading and writing and talking all at the same time. So we're talking multi-talented people here. Connie, who did the, I'm sorry, you're still trying to eat your lunch. This is.
Yeah. So our group decided to nominate our audience to report out.
Okay.
Yep, so our 2 volunteers.
Yay, all right. And so you'll have to start by introducing yourselves. Okay. So.
You can go first then.
Are you sure? So I'm Lisa from Michigan State, and this is
Ruth from County Clare.
all right. I wanted to thank Connie for facilitating such a great meeting. Those that were in attendance, we just had a really great conversation, and it was really active and informative. And it's my understanding that the notes will be available for people. So we want to just touch on a few things, or did you want me to? Because one of the things we started with were some of the barriers, but I don't know if we really want to spend the time going through those and just move on to our next steps, if that would be okay with everyone. But if you want to, view the notes in detail,
They can do it after.
they can do it after. That's great. So what I will do is, let's see.
And you can highlight. You don't need to read through every point.
No, right. We'll just highlight a few of
What you saw
ideas.
as key resources.
And we also, what I really liked about this session is that they also captured it up here. I know it might be hard for people to see, but that I think helped facilitated that conversation because people can see that their voice was collected and heard.
Actually, for one of the ones for resources or solutions, applying a strengths-based perspective, what happened to come up in the conversation was about a person with disabilities who was working in a retail shop, and they were talking about the fact of that the person had a problem with mobility and wanted to sit down, but they were very much into fashion and the whole industry and would definitely suit the environment, but whether it would be a disadvantage for the employer, if the employer would see a disadvantage for the fact that this person was sitting down and not walking around the shop. And one way we're looking at it, where if you think outside the box, that if this person has the stylist mind and is able to give people selections, I would be definitely an customer. But if I could go up to somebody, it doesn't matter to me if they're sitting down or not. If they can look at a body shape and style and actually say to somebody, the dress is just inside the door if you get that one, I'm going to be the happiest camper. I don't need them. So it's looking outside the box and using their strengths and skills where they should. Did you pick one?
No, and I totally agree. And this was just a list of some of the resources or solutions. And what you'll notice in the list is they're really bi-directional. It's like, what does the employer need? What language should we be using to engage the employer? How do we know the employer is well trained to include people with a variety of abilities? And also work with, I always hesitate, our clients, consumers, or just people with different abilities to learn how to adapt or work within our system as well. So it's like both ways, and I thought that was really powerful as well, to have just that whole a variety of perspectives. Let's see, what's our next one? Some best practices?
Best practice.
Mm-hmm. Do you have one you want to highlight?
Actually, I'll take the paid work internship experiences. I think like anything of where when we were children, and it was a case of that if you did chores, you'd get pocket money. And really with something like that, of where we even learnt it as children, you know, and there was consequences if you didn't do them really, unless you were spoilt or something and didn't live in my house. But the idea about it is that when somebody goes to do something in work, they deserve to get paid, because that payment, no matter what price it is, it's an acknowledgement of the work that they've done, and it gives them a sense of value. Whereas if you take somebody, it's different if you have an agreement that there's going to be a traineeship, a little bit of an internship for a while. But after a while, you have to start to respect the fact that they are coming in and they're working the hours the same way as their neurotypical counterparts. And it needs to be valued, because then that also gives them incentive for coming in during the day, and they can also put goals in mind of something that they want to buy.
If I could make one point, I think Connie made this point during that part of the conversation. We know that internships and work experiences are the #1 predictor of full-time employment. So the more we can equip, especially young people and young adults, or people coming back into the workforce, with those backgrounds and skills, the chances of them being employed as a result are far greater than just going out and trying to interview for jobs and seeing if there might be a good fit. So that needs to be a fundamental part of how we move forward, is that we provide those opportunities.
Did everyone hear that? Okay, great. One of the best practices, and then we'll move on to our future direction, that I really agree with is building and expanding those natural and peer supports, especially when you think of people transitioning from high school into the work environment. You know, they don't want someone that looks like their mom telling them what to do and how to dress and what to, you know, so having people with the same interests and the same look is very helpful. And that relationship is very powerful, because often those natural and peer supports go for a very long time and really help everyone. They learn from each other. So I just think that's a great best practice. Do we want to look at a couple of the future direction?
Oh, do you mind mention about benefit counseling?
Oh, no, that's another great one that was raised, like so many. What Connie was mentioning is just counseling around benefits, because as we know, as people are working, that impacts their ability for benefits. It could be their Social Security in the United States. I'm not sure how it works in Ireland, but also their health insurance and everything like that. And there's a fear about engaging in work and knowing what does this mean and how does this impact me. And if it's someone especially transitioning from like a high school to work time placement, their parent is still around. And that parent is also afraid because they're like, okay, even if now it's okay, I'm not always going to be here, and then what happens? You know, so maybe we shouldn't push the envelope now because, you know, what are we going to do in the future when I'm not here? So it really is a big issue about having that kind of benefits counseling, sitting down with experts and talking about that and having a plan in place, not just for that transition, but for a longer transition as well. Did I capture what you, okay, great.
Actually, another point that Connie had made, which I found very good, was regarding preparing elevator speeches to be applied to different settings, because you'll have the employer who has got different criteria that's important to them. And it's a case of switching around, using their business terminology, and then being able to turn around where you're then being able to say to the person with disabilities is to give them the reason why it will benefit them working in the workplace. That you don't want to put somebody into a workplace unless it's going to be something that they like to do. And there should be at least a choice, and then it's up to them to decide, and then given a certain length of time to say, we'll try this and see if it works out, and then come back, but leave it open, that it's not going to be a definite thing, but to be willing to work backwards and forwards with them. And I'll go on to one of the just future trainings we were thinking about was a mentorship program within businesses of where, like some colleges and that have a leadership program, is actually developed with business for them to develop within their own business, a mentorship program, which they would get some training, which would be then put across, or some government trainings where they give disability awareness training, where the funding is given, 90% of funding in Ireland is given to the business. So it's actually just costing them 10% of the cost of training for their employees to get trained. For the employees' point of view, what they're coming from is that they can write this down as personal and professional development on their CVs. And I think once they've got into the program, they're working with people, it can only benefit both. Because you know where, when you've given somebody a gift and you see the expression on their face, that means more than really when you're getting one yourself. And I think with something like that, with more repetition, it'll work out like that.
Oh, that's great. And I mentioned that kind of bi-directional employer, school, and transition. And one of the things that came up was really being able to look at what curriculums are out there for training, which are the best, what are some best practices, maybe some research around those, so that we can incorporate that into all different aspects. So there's a lot of things out there, you know, Google, the web can be scary. So having some best practices and identified curriculum that's the most successful and inclusive, I think would be really helpful for everyone.
I'm just going to finish and just say that for me as a parent and somebody who does training in the area of autism, that the last 2 days has been not only a break for me, but it's been very, very powerful, and got about an hour and a half drive on the way home, and I know it's going to take longer than that for everything to digest through it. And I just wanted to thank everybody who participated and got the event together. And I'm just going to share one last thing that my son, who's 14, has autism, who told me when he was 12. He was explaining a situation and I wasn't really getting it that well. And he said, okay, I'll give you an analogy. And he said, just say I had a brand new car. And I said, okay. And he said, just say I knew how to drive. And I was like, okay. And he said, having autism at times can be like having a brand new car, being able to drive, but there's no road for me to drive on. And it hit me of where I suddenly realized going, he has the ability, whatever ability that he has, and it's up to us as a society, with the likes of groups like this where people are getting together, to help make sure that we put the right material on the roads, that it doesn't need all potholes, or the county council another few weeks' time, to not only build the roads, but actually to put the correct signage on there. That they have it, and sometimes some cars need to be tweaked more and oil changed more, but essentially just think about anybody that you're working with or working for. They have their car and they know how to drive, and the rest is up to you. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. Thank you, everybody.
That was wonderful. Thank you for sharing that. The other group, I think they're coming down from up in the upper stratosphere there. And so when you get started, if you could please introduce yourselves again so that the audience knows who's talking. And
You're both reporters. Good. So
Great.
both introduce yourselves.
great, thank you.
Hello, I'm Ji-Yoon Park. I introduced you guys in the morning. I'm a postdoctoral, Haggerty postdoctoral research fellow. I was a moderator in the session 4.
Right? And were you also?
Hi, my name is Christiana. I'm also a Haggerty Fellow,
Displayed.
so I'm just here to support you.
It would be good to get this displayed if we could. Maybe put on a thumb drive or something, or link her computer. What would be the easiest?
Yeah, because it's an Apple.
Oh, it's an Apple.
Does not connect to anything. USB.
What about a thumb? Will it take it has a USB port?
Have your thumb
Yeah.
around on that? I
Just
can
put it on there and.
I need,
Yeah, you need a dongle for it.
Oh.
I just summarized. So
All right,
I
then,
can,
okay, we will just summarize. You will have to use your imagination, don't look at the board, because that's not what it is. So shall I close this down?
In fact, shall I just kill the screen now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I can just,
Oh, that's
oh, you have a, wait, we have some capacity here? Do you want to put it up?
Do you have HDMI?
All right, let's just, no, let's just talk.
Yeah.
Let's just talk. You can handle that, right? No slides, just talk. Okay.
So we talked about early diagnosis, searching for risk factors, secondary prevention of autism, attitude and bioethical issues. So early diagnosis or identification should be conducted via not one way from pediatrician, but diagnosis in a multiple disciplinary team, including parents, psychologists, medical providers, and speech-language therapists. Characteristics of autism is like continuum. So some are more sensitive to like sensory issues, and some are not. So descriptive diagnosis should also be considered, like a contextualized domains. We also talked about how to best train pediatricians. Often pediatrician is not prepared. So usually they said come and see pediatrician periodically. So like come to see me next year. So and then we talked about like what they're doing during the 1 year. So something should be changed to the something should be changed in between. Yeah. With regard to parents, sometimes they use same words but different meanings when communicating with pediatricians when talking about their child's characteristics. So avoid miscommunication early on is necessary. We also talked about secondary prevention in terms of knowledge translation and communication. Need most efficient and effective way to deliver the messages should be explored. So like prevention is, we keep saying like prevention is critical. So pregnant women should do this and do that, should not do this and do that, but more is needed to speak out to the public to, so all of them have knowledge about like how to prevent and things like that. So not only for like a pregnant woman, but in general. We then talked about attitude. So being very careful using language and research project around definition and connotation of autism spectrum disorder and social construction of ASD seem to be explored. And finally, in terms of research ideas in developmental disabilities area, we talked about collecting common protocol to determine if this child has autism, and nutrition affecting diagnosis and prevention. promoting physical activities and what the prevalence of kids in general, not a prevalence of registered people in one institute, to compare longitudinally and see what's really changing. Also, we talked about resilience mechanism and not changing students with autism's characteristics or personalities, etc., but explore cases, how we live well with person with autism, and see what's the best practice, best conditions to live with kids with autism. If you have anything to add?
Yeah, so we also spoke about like educating the general public, and some contributions were around how caregivers work with people, children with autism or IDD in general, but do not really understand what it is. So talking about research questions, we're like, how can we best disseminate some of this prevention, opportunities with the general public so that we're all on the same page. So that's just what I wanted to add. Jiyun said everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good. I don't really have a whole lot to add to those really lovely summaries of what was said. I just want to give the personal reflection of what struck me is what I heard in that session that I don't usually hear in my circles. One was the emphasis on resilience rather than disability. What is it that seems to be protective, prevents the evolution of disorders or makes the disorders less troublesome? What can families and society do? We're less interested in changing the person with the disability than perhaps modifying the environment to make it more able to make it a better life for the person with the disability. That came out loud and clear. Another thing that came out loud and clear is that we're not all talking the same language. Parents don't speak the same language as doctors, and the community at large speaks another language. And what are the attitudes towards autism, and how do they compare to the attitudes towards other developmental disabilities? The whole problem of public understanding, public education, came up for a lot of discussion I was interested to hear. Moving to more tangible, we set as our goal, Geraldine and I, rather presumptuously, to develop a common research thing, whatever, resuscitating some plans from a couple of years ago that were never acted upon, which we distributed to the group in a variety of areas. And if we could do one concrete thing, and maybe we can do that, is that Gemma, the study you heard about today from Geraldine, might be able to, in its early stage, you might be able to look and see what Gemma is collecting that the National Echo Project in the USA that we're part of is collecting. See if we can't get common pieces of information about people with autism and other developmental disabilities, and see if we can't find some common themes here that operate across the ocean to get further in. I think primary prevention also did get a lot of play. What are the risk factors that we could look at that could help us understand the developmental disabilities better? Because as I was saying in the group, because people emphasized how difficult it is to do diagnostic work with long wait times, 15-minute opportunities, just emphasizing that primary prevention doesn't have a waiting period. You don't have to come back to the doctor. Primary prevention is something we do for everybody, be it immunization, be it eating the right diet, be it having a clean water supply, whatever those are things that don't require all the paraphernalia of interactions that hold us back, slow us down. So I think those are the themes there. I probably left out a few, and maybe Judy and Dan and Keith and Tony might want to supplement what I say. Is there anything major I left out, guys? Perfect. You think it's okay? Yes? Oh, I thought you were going to say something. All right. Thank you very much.
That's like a big thumbs
people.
up.
Thank you.
So Geraldine, anything from your perspective that Nigel didn't cover that you want to kind of save as, so if you could look at some future research directions, what would that look like?
Just to echo really what Nigel said, I think, echo, exactly. Yeah, we have a great opportunity to do cross-the-motor research and collaborations between the two groups. And I suppose if I was to summarise, thorough identification of risk factors that may lead to prevention and good communication of that with the public.
Okay. All right. And Connie, from your perspective, from the employment and going from school to third level to employment, some key research questions that you think might be really a next direction for us?
Some of the research questions that we talked about is when we do research, besides focusing on the person with disability or family, also looking at the demand side, the employer, what are the perspective, how we can create a mutually beneficial experience when we are thinking about them transitioning. The other piece is what are some of the strategies we can have putting together, bringing the different systems, including the medical systems, when they're younger, like managing different kind of healthcare providers, all the way to how that communication with the educational system so that they can have the accommodation they need in school, and then transfer those into the workplace settings in a way that is seamless transition.
Yeah.
And what did you?
Two matters I noticed that they didn't mention what I said here about employers and why people avoid employment because I had witnessed, I had a job when I was in a factory, and it was about medical matter, which I was an epileptic, and the supervisor was all right, but he had someone that was an epileptic, but the higher up authority, it was totally the opposite. They were given the door, and so I think they need to be tackled there. At least to have a seminar or a conference on those matters. And the other matter is about when it comes to family. It's a tricky topic to go down when it comes to about relationships, because they don't want you to a person with a disability, if they heard you had a relationship, wouldn't go down well at all when it comes to your sisters and brothers, especially when your mother and father has passed on. So really that needs to be tackled as well.
And I think what you're pointing out is that...
It's a barrier.
Right, exactly, and that people that have had those discriminatory practices and the impact of that, and looking at research around what are those positive practices where that doesn't become an issue, or who are those employers or businesses that have model practices that could be built upon. We know that the experiences that you were sharing are ones that occur, and if we can build a body of knowledge and a cadre of employers who are willing to come together to say, here are strategies that other employers could use, it can be a very powerful thing, so thank you. I think that really sums up the kind of interaction that we had. I'm going to turn it back over to Ian so he can give his blessing. I think it's Ian and Geraldine are giving their blessing. Because Sister's always not here to give us the blessing. Oh, there she is. Oh, well, maybe she should come down and give the blessing. But exactly.
Well, I think a warm round of applause for Lynnae. Lynnae is the consummate workshop coordinator. Detailed, thorough, and very great job, and thanks for everyone who's been working with her. You know, it's been a privilege for me to serve as chair of the conference, and I want to thank a lot of people too. Cormac, I think, working here, we really appreciate your efforts, and I'm not going to mention too many people because once you forget somebody, you're in trouble. So I look across up there, I see all the people we need to thank, but it's we started off the conference with comments from the Director of Research of DOCTRID, Geraldine, and we're going to end with comments from the Director of Research, DOCTRID, Geraldine.
Thanks, Ian. I wouldn't call it comments, just words of thanks and appreciation. So one of the big goals we had for this conference was, closing one chapter and opening another. So I was very keen that we could get really firm research plans and collaborations in place. And I really feel we have absolutely achieved that objective. So I will be following up with everybody. You'll be hearing from me next week. So I'm really determined now that we are going to put those wonderful research plans, objectives, questions and collaborations to action. So then just brief words of thanks. There's lots of people to thank. First of all, Ian and Mike, and the rest of the conference committee, Connie, Nigel, Greta. I also want to thank Lynnae. She did Trojan work, running around between our groups and assimilating everything we were saying. Nigel for his contribution this morning, that was great. Then I want to thank, of course, Sister Zoe and Respect. They're the group of people are so valuable to us because they make all this happen and we're here because of them. Also Natalia Jackson and her support of what we're doing here and the incredible participation and presence we had here of the service was really, really great. And words cannot express how grateful we are to Greta. She pulled the whole thing together almost single-handedly. She's just been absolutely outstanding. Also, Sandra, Stephanie and Liam up the back, thank you also. You're great. So the only thing I've left to add is DOCTRID 7, 2021. We don't have a location yet, but we will keep you informed. So hope to see you all in 2 years' time and collaborate with you closely in the meantime. So thank you to everybody.